Did anyone really know what to expect from the remake of Silent Hill 2? I definitely didn't, that's for sure. Until recently, I had never even played a Silent Hill game. Not only that, I had also never played a game from this remake's developer, Bloober team. And to be honest, I've always ignorantly viewed the entire Silent Hill franchise to just be a cheap knockoff of the survival horror franchise that I do have a lot of love for, Resident Evil. But now that I've spent time playing not only this Silent Hill 2 remake, but also some of the original Silent Hill games, all I can say is that I am extremely disappointed that I did not give this franchise a chance before now. For whatever reason, probably because Konami has just been kind of out of the picture of the gaming landscape for a while now, this Silent Hill 2 remake was the first time that I've really been interested in playing a game from this series. I don't know why, but it just made me really curious. So in preparation for the remake, I went back and played the original Silent Hill. I was amazed at how playable that game felt to me, but I was also amazed at how wrong my preconceptions were about the game and this series. Sure, it shares a lot of DNA with Resident Evil, but it's far from just a Resident Evil clone. Silent Hill takes a distinctively different approach. I would describe Resident Evil as being more traditional horror. It has zombies and gore and purposely campy dialogue. Silent Hill, on the other hand, is, I don't know, I almost want to say ethereal. It's cerebral, psychological horror where nothing is all that traditionally scary, but everything just feels off, like nothing is quite the way it should be. I really love that feeling when it comes to horror. The first Silent Hill game establishes this vibe perfectly, and the original Silent Hill 2 just doubles down and keeps going with it. I really wanted to play through the entirety of the original Silent Hill 2 before I played the remake. But by the time I was making some progress on that game, the remake was released and I didn't want to wait on playing it. So I dropped the original and jumped into the remake. I do plan on going back one day though. I think a lot of people, myself included, were unsure of Bloober Team's ability to put together a remake of Silent Hill 2 that lived up to the weight and importance of that original game. I've always heard mixed to negative reviews about their other games, which is why I had never tried one. But the moment you start playing this Silent Hill 2 remake, it's obvious. Bloober Team has not only done their homework, they're also clearly huge fans of the original games. They know what makes Silent Hill so unique, and they've done their damnedest to try and make sure this remake has everything it needs to feel genuine and not like a cash grab. The atmosphere in Silent Hill is so specific, so unique, and thankfully they nailed it here in this remake. Sure, the use of heavy fog in the original games may have been partly due to technical limitations of the hardware, but it also lent those games a very particular brand of eeriness. You never quite knew what you'd find in the heart of that fog. This remake replicates that atmosphere perfectly. It seriously couldn't be better. When you're indoors, however, the fog is replaced with darkness, and I'm telling you, this game is extremely dark. You have a flashlight, but it's not a whole lot of help. The pitch black surroundings are almost oppressively claustrophobic. Honestly, it's a little too much for my liking, but this isn't a problem that I just have with this game specifically. Most modern horror games overuse overly dark environments, in my opinion, including my beloved Resident Evil games. I just feel like it adds more frustration than fright, but I may be alone in that opinion. It very well could be that most others really enjoy this level of darkness in their horror games. I will say that the darkness does add a good bit of tension to the combat, and speaking of, this game has some of the best combat that I've ever experienced in a survival horror game. The game almost never gives you enough ammo for your weapons, so you have to heavily rely on melee combat. That means you have to get up close and personal with the enemies, and they don't hold back. They really pack a punch, and it makes combat with them extremely tense. With each swing you take, you really feel it in your bones because you really need your attacks to connect. I don't know that I've ever felt combat in a game quite as strongly as I did with this one. When the game does give you ammo, it's definitely a little easier to take down enemies, but it still isn't particularly easy. There's a good amount of sway in the aiming, and it makes firing off one of your bullets always feel at least somewhat risky. I know it sounds like a negative thing to not have precise aiming in a game, but when it comes to survival horror, that's exactly what I want. The game doesn't make you feel completely helpless, but it does make it so that you have to really care and think about how you handle each enemy encounter. And if that means that sometimes you just have to run away, I mean, well, what's more quintessentially horror than running away from something that's trying to kill you? Objectively, I know that the combat in this game isn't perfect, it's clunky, and it can be hard to handle multiple enemies at once, but I don't know, it just really worked for me in this particular setting. My only real complaint with the combat isn't directly related to the combat itself, but more so what happens when you take damage. The edges of the screen turn red. This isn't anything new. Lots of games use the edges of the screen to let you know when you need to heal up. But there was something about the way it was handled in this game that just didn't work with me. Maybe it's because it's such a bright color of pure red. I don't know exactly, but I found it to be extremely distracting and annoying. So even if I hadn't taken all that much damage, I would still use a health item to get rid of the annoying border around the screen. Really, I should have been conserving health items because I was always low on them, but I don't know, I just really couldn't play the game unless I was full health and my view was unobstructed. You can turn this off, but then you lose the clearest and easiest way to know where your health is at, so turning it off is a double-edged sword. I also have a small complaint about what happens when you die. You're set back to your last save, which is like, duh, of course you're set back to your last save. But here's the thing, the game almost never auto-saves, and you can't save from the pause menu, you have to save at set save points. The same system was used in the original Silent Hill games that I played, but the problem I have with this is that this game can sometimes be stingy with how many save locations it offers you. If you die while exploring or unlocking a new area and you haven't made it to the next save location yet, you'll have to replay that entire section again. You'll have to defeat all the enemies again. You'll have to redo any puzzles you finished again. I know this is true to the original, but I don't know, it just didn't really bother me that much with the older games. Probably I'm just spoiled by the way that other modern games let you save all the time, but it was a genuine frustration for me a few times, and it might be that way for others too. But to play devil's advocate against myself, I will admit the stress of potentially losing progress is a big factor in what makes the combat feel so intense and so real. I really do get that, but I personally feel that in some sections of the game where you're asked to make a good amount of progress, an extra save point or two would be really appreciated, and I don't think it would hurt the integrity of the game. And really, that's a small nitpick. Honestly, I have almost nothing but good things to say about this remake, and I haven't even mentioned my absolute favorite thing about it, the voice acting. There are only a handful of characters in the entire game, but every single one of the actors in this game have done a terrific job, and I just want to specifically talk about the main character, James. There were multiple times during my playthrough where I was struck with how good this performance was. James isn't a very overtly emotional character. He's typically calm and collected. Sometimes stoic characters can come across as bland and boring in video games. I think it's just hard to portray the subtle emotions of a subtle character in this medium, but the voice actor for James, whose name is Luke Roberts by the way, really blew it out of the park here. But honestly, like I mentioned earlier, every member of this cast did a phenomenal job. It's really fantastic stuff. The facial capture work is also really great. I know a lot of games have great facial animations these days, but I've played some big, high-budget games recently where it was pretty bad, so it's still worth pointing out when it's done well, like it is here. And speaking of well done, there's the puzzles. In my mind, puzzles are a really important part of a survival horror game. They serve as a way to break up the unrelenting tension and action and give you a little bit of a palate cleanser. And the puzzles in Silent Hill 2 serve that purpose quite well. Nothing is all that complicated or cryptic, but at the same time, nothing is so easy that it feels like pointless filler either. In particular, I really like the puzzles that are themed to whatever room or building you're in, and there are thankfully a lot of these. The theming really helps make these puzzles feel like they belong in this game that can otherwise feel very different tonally and gameplay-wise. It just feels like the developers put good, honest thought behind the puzzles, and honestly that observation can pretty much be applied to every aspect of the game, and I think it really shows. This remake of Silent Hill 2 was clearly created with true respect and admiration for the original series. Sure, it has some small problems, but it succeeds in what matters most. The tone and atmosphere are pitch perfect. The combat is dead on for the genre, and the story is delivered masterfully by amazingly talented actors. And I know I really haven't touched on the story in this review, and that's for a couple reasons. One is spoilers. I really do think that with this game, the less you know, the better. But also, if you played the original game, or hell, even if you didn't, you probably already know that the story in Silent Hill 2 is legendary. And all you really need to know about this remake is that I don't think they screwed it up. In my opinion, if you have any interest in playing this remake, I absolutely recommend it. I honestly doubt that you'll end up disappointed, no matter what your past experience is with Silent Hill 2 or the Silent Hill franchise in general. But if you've already played the remake and you're looking for something else to play in the horror genre, I may have something for you, but you'll need to be okay with playing something a little weird and out there. I recently reviewed this game called Happy Funland, It's basically a VR game where you explore a haunted version of Disney World. The game does have some big issues, but if you're a fan of VR, horror, and theme parks like I am, you may get a kick out of my review. I'd also like to invite you to check out the Gaming Gig podcast. It's a weekly podcast I do with my friend Daniel, where we basically chat about all the recent gaming news. No matter what though, I genuinely hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.